dropping 15 to 20%. Now we do something different than was done. The toll swap is different than what was done. The other thing that is a major difference is we don't take 100% of the money and give it to transit. We take 25% of it and give it to roads and bridges. What this did is it brought the AAA that sued me in 1980, the Motor Trucking Association that opposed the Bloomberg plan, Mark Weprin, who's a council member who was adamant against it, his brother David is still adamant against it. It brought a number of other elected officials from central Brooklyn and outer Brooklyn and Queens to say, okay, we're considering this, if not outright supporting it. It took some of the edge off of it. Now, this is the Move New York plan. The Fix New York plan differs a little bit in this. It does set the central business district the same exact way, south of 60th Street, except for the fact that it's not on the bridges themselves. Now, why does that make a difference? It makes a difference because it takes the headline away, no matter who we would talk to. If the media was there, the headline, after talking about all of this, was always tolls on the East River bridges. And that generates a reflex reaction, and people come out to oppose it. Under the Fix New York, it's not on the bridges. So there are a couple of escape hatches. You could take the Brooklyn Bridge, take the FDR Drive northbound, never go into the central business district. But if you take the FDR Drive northbound and get off at 23rd Street and you enter the central business district, then you're charged. If you come over the Queensboro Bridge, upper level, you're dropped off at 62nd, 63rd, you're not charged. Or you come on the lower level and you go on 60th and you go north, you're not charged. So it's a pure cordon zone. You enter the cordon zone, the streets of the cordon zone, and you're charged. So that's the big difference. 1152 was the number that was thrown about. It wasn't necessarily 24 hours a day. The panel agreed at a minimum 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, with consideration to do some weekends and some consideration to do some extended hours beyond that. So the Move New York plan was somewhat similar, but every entry into the central business district, including the FDR Drive, was included. The second thing that's very similar is a charge for Uber, Lyft, Via, and the others that are now crowding our streets, and taxi cabs for hire vehicles. There will be under this plan, now when I say will be, it's not necessarily a done deal. It's far from that. But it would be under this plan up to 96th Street. People would be charged extra for taking Uber, Lyft, Via, not if they stay in Brooklyn, not if they stay in Upper Manhattan, not if they're Bronx, Staten Island, only Manhattan south of 96th Street. Again, those areas are suffering some of the worst congestion. And there are a number of other elements to it, dealing with the placards, which is a huge problem, better enforcement, but these are city responsibilities, but the panel brought many of these up. The buses that are coming in, the tour buses, the buses that now, like Bolt Bus and others that are using the city streets as bus terminals, all that was raised as well. In list form, invest in public transportation improvements. We recommend doing it now, starting in the outer boroughs, and develop a plan. Improve enforcement of traffic laws, overhaul the placard program that I talked about, the bus congestion, Taxi and Limousine Commission to deal with all these new vehicles, which will soon be autonomous. That's another presentation you want to invite me to a year from now. And implement a congestion surcharge of an FHV and taxi trips. So within the next 12 months, 2019, we can do an FHV charge. When I say we, it's not me, it's the city and the state that could do it, and the legislature that can make that happen. And the city and the state, as you know, aren't necessarily seeing eye to eye. They have to work together on it. Why do we want to do that right away? Because we want to do what London did. Before congestion pricing came in, London did a bunch of transportation improvements. They bought 500 buses. They demonstrated to the populace that transit will improve. And I think we need to do that as well. The fastest money that we can get is the FHV money. The tolls are going to take several years to construct, but also to design, to probably face a lawsuit, because I've been through this many times before, the environmental impact statements and that sort of thing. And then once it's implemented, the panel recommended that there be a beta test using trucks, and then finally introducing it within 6 months to all vehicles. Now, I'm getting lots of questions about why is traffic so bad. It's not that hard, and most people have hit upon it. It got so bad in this decade, since 2010. And if you look at the growth of the transportation network companies, that's TNC, which is Uber and Lyft and Via. I really should change that to app-based. Hardly anybody's using TNC anymore. Look at that growth rate. The taxi industry has been around for 100 years. The app-based industry for 6, 7 years. They overtook the taxi industry in almost no time. They are now carrying more riders than the taxis are. And the rate is continuing to soar. There's been a 6-fold increase in the 2 years, January 15 to January 17, and there's been more leading up to 18, and I'm trying to get the latest data on that. Now, when Uber and Lyft came around, they said, well, we're for all the boroughs. We're going to fill in those gaps. Well, where have they concentrated? They've concentrated in Manhattan. They've concentrated in the hot parts of Brooklyn and Queens, the waterfront communities. So where they have concentrated their trips is A, where we already have the best transit, B, where we already have the worst traffic, and C, where we have our wealthiest citizens for the most part. So it's kind of like city planning backwards in the way we did this. The communities that needed it the least got it. The communities that had the worst congestion got more congestion. And the people that were the wealthiest and had more choices than others got the service. So it didn't live up to expectations. And where did they go? Well, this is Bruce Schaller. By the way, I rely on Bruce Schaller for a lot of this work. You can see the ride services are going up, buses go down, subway ridership goes down. Along with that, studies in Boston, studies in San Francisco, UC Davis did a study of a number of cities, support the same thing. A fair number of Via Lyft riders are coming out of mainly buses around the country, but here buses and subways. The mayor raised the equity issue, and that's why I throw this in here. The lowest income among us are rarely driving in and paying $40 or $50 to park, or $800 to park on a monthly basis in some of these areas. It's that expensive to park. Nonetheless, the mayor made it about this, said it was regressive, but if you look at this from the Tri-State Transportation Campaign, the average New Yorker who has a choice, owns a car but could take transit, makes $45,000 more than the transit rider. In every borough, you see that kind of skew. The one to the left is the city, is citywide. Even if we charge that person every single day that they came in to commute, it would amount to $28.80, and there would still be $42,000 delta to the people that don't have a choice, to the transit captives. So that's why I think the equity issue doesn't exactly hold water, but it's not just me. The Community Service Society, which represents low-income New Yorkers, and David Jones on the MTA board, he represents low-income people in New York City. They came out with a very good report looking at low-income people. Now, Sheila came out with a report at CUF. Did you work on that report? Mm-hmm. That was a fantastic report of healthcare workers who tend to be among the lowest income people. And in the map that CUF put out, you could see the concentration was not in the central business district. There are some, but overwhelmingly in the other areas. And I would maintain those in the central business district are arriving by public transit on it. There has been widespread support, but this is kind of old because there was a recent survey that shows there isn't support. The mayor was citing one that said people vote for a millionaire's tax, not congestion pricing. It's true. You ask people, you want a millionaire's tax? Or do you want to pay something? I don't want to pay. I'm not a millionaire, so I'm not worried about it. But when we explain the Move New York plan to people, the polls have shown that there is support, and support in every borough for it. And civic organizations, and I think it's worth noting the environmental justice groups, which these are the big supporters of Bill de Blasio, and almost all, if not all, supported. And the environmental groups, also big supporters of the mayor, supported chambers of commerce, labor, political groups. Editorial support, virtually every single newspaper has come out in support. Yesterday with Scott Reckler, we were at the New York Times editorial board. We hope that there'll be another editorial coming out from them. And we're making the rounds again of editorial boards because we think some pushing is needed right now and some fire on the feet of elected officials going forward. There are other options. Raise the gasoline tax. I won't go into all of these, but most of these are more DOA or, we're dreaming if we're going to restore the commuter tax. The political climate right now is not that we're going to get the millionaire's tax, and the mayor has floated that for a number of other reasons, not just transit on it. So how did we address those 5 points? Well, it's viewed as a tax, but in this case it's a user fee and you get something for it. You get better transit and higher speeds. The sanctity of interborough travel, we slash the tolls between the Queens and the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, Brooklyn, only travel to the CBD is priced. The boroughs pay the bulk and little burden on Manhattanites south of 96th Street. In the new calculation, because of the Uber, Lyft, the for-hire vehicle charges, actually Manhattanites now pay more than Brooklyn or Queens do collectively. No trust that the dollars will go to transportation. You know that Scott Reckler proposed there's some new corporation. There needs to be improvement in how the MTA spends money. I don't have the answers here, but that has to be part of this. You can bond some of the money to traffic so people can't steal that money, elected officials, future elected officials. Enabling legislation to define the revenue assignment so we know what we're getting. And a maintenance of effort commitment. The reason for the maintenance of effort commitment, you've all seen the elected officials with the huge checks that the federal government, when the federal government gave money, $100 million to the city of New York. Well, when I was a city official, and I got one of those big checks and I stood there with the politicians, the Office of Management and Budget was taking $50 million out of my pocket. So they'll say, well, you just got $100 million, you're ahead by $50 million. So it has to be a maintenance of effort. And the cost-centric communities, they get a lot. Their tolls are reduced. Increased investment in roads and bridges, and they need it. An emphasis on improving service in the subway deserts. And on the Move New York, we did outline a number of proposals. And this was not part of the assignment of the Fix NYC panel. And I think it's incumbent upon citizens and this group to come up with a list of improvements if we're going to be getting more money there. This is just something a group put together at Move New York. And I conclude with, this slide, which I think was wonderful from the New Yorker. I wouldn't be opposed to a cat tax, 2 dogs talking. And I can't tell you how many letters I have gotten, and some of them shock me, because some come from the people that are talking about social equity, that are holier than thou about it, but it affects them personally, and they're yelling at me that I'm putting up a wall preventing them from coming into Manhattan. Just creating that. So people always say it's the other person. It's the truckers. Do the truckers. Do the FHPs. Do them on it. But I think, they captured it very well, in the New Yorker. And I would not be opposed to the William Whitestone Bridge toll hike, which was what we were doing. So I conclude, to be fair, everybody should contribute, not just cats. Thank you very much.
Let's just be clear that the item before the state legislature is not the Move New York, it's the Fix NYC.
Right, yes.
Which does not include reduction of tolls on the non-centric crossings.
Which a number of elected officials have now raised. Senator Lanza, who is our supporter in the Senate, Republican from Staten Island, has sent over his dead body, unless it includes that. Fortunately, the governor has come out and said, he recommends that. He tweeted something that said, we've got to be fair, we've got to lower the tolls on these other bridges, they're too high. So I think even though Fix NYC did not recommend that, and believe me, I tried, but I was 1 of 15, I believe that that will be part of the equation as we go into the political process.
Wonderful. Trudy?
Yeah. I want you to know that while I have been in favor of congestion pricing since the Lindsay days, and since you were there.
I know that.
And I was there. Okay. But,
Andrew, can I take your seat?
Oh, please.
but ever since, when you spoke at Hunter College, what was that, about 3 or 4 months ago at Roosevelt House?
I think it was longer than that, but
Well,
whatever.
whenever it was, I came back to this group and suggested, and they actually listened to me, which doesn't happen that often, that in principle, we go on record as of the concept of congestion pricing, not all of the particulars. At the last meeting, after you came out with the Fix New York, and the governor had finally come out with his ideas and whatever, I asked that we write a follow-up letter, memo, whatever, saying that, again, in principle, we like it. And as a result of that, rather than putting something in writing, you're here today. So you do have support in different degrees from this group.
Good, I
Okay,
appreciate that.
but what you have outlined today, and the question that Andrew just brought up about the tolls, which I think the governor answered already about doing something so that there's more equity. I have been speaking to a lot of community groups and local groups and, excuse the expression, but political groups and political clubs about this. And just for the record, for the record, what happened to the Bluebird plan was as much political, with a capital P, as it was for all of the other reasons that you outlined. But leaving that aside, it is amazing how in the last year, and even since your Hunter College presentation, that even people in Manhattan, in the CBD, living there, are now saying, we've got to do something, and maybe this is the way to do it. We can't, we've got to do something about fixing up the subways and the buses and whatever. Yesterday, and when I said that I was going to be seeing you today, a question came up which you touched on, and that is with Uber, Lyft, all of the for-hire vehicles. But specifically, and this was to a group of seniors like me, people who have to go to hospitals, doctors, etc., especially below 60, like NYU, like where I go now all the time, NYU Orthopedic, and have to go and live above 60th Street on both the east and the west side, and have to take a for-hire vehicle or a cab, and they'll probably take a for-hire vehicle. We all know that Uber, Lyft, and all of them will pass whatever cost you put on them, they're going to pass it on to the rider, which means that people who cannot afford it will be, whatever word you want, penalized, but they have to go to the hospitals, doctors, etc., in that area. Has there been any Has there been any consideration about that and making sure that Uber, Lyft, etc., do not pass on what they're going to be charged, or whatever the word you want to use, and especially to seniors, people with disabilities, etc., who are forced, they can't take public transportation. I mean, God help me, for 3 months I couldn't take buses or subways. I had to take those for-hire vehicles.
So this is fairly common, one of the common questions. And when Bloomberg first came out with his proposal, it was up to 86th Street. And so a number of people talked about the hardship of going to Sloan Kettering. They'd have the tiers as I go out to community groups. My loved one needs, treatment at Sloan Kettering, and now you're going to charge us. So the line has been moved down to 60th Street, excludes that hospital zone. NYU is the biggest hospital in the zone. We happen to be the consultants for NYU Langone. 85% of the people that arrive at Langone do not arrive by private car. But there are some people, there's always going to be a hardship case. My approach right now is leave that to the legislators. I'm not going to suggest a single exemption for a cop, for persons with disabilities. What I do recommend, of course, those that have the New York City placards, maybe they would get some kind of break, not the people that have the state placards. Accessoride, improving accessoride is really the key. And I think over the next few years we should see dramatic improvements, because now there are micro-transit companies that want to come in and do accessoride for a fraction and offer service that is so much superior. But Trudy, we're always going to have a hardship case, and there is that poor person that does drive in on the midnight shift on it. I'd say let the elected officials deal with it. I'm not going to recommend any exemptions whatsoever.
And let's not forget that 80 cents of every yellow cab ride is taken out for the MTA.
Yeah.
So in other words, but when you said this will be passed on to Uber, Lyft, etc., you know that they're just going to pass it on to their customers.
Of course. Every business does that.
So there's no consideration. I'm speaking first. Now I'm back on subways and buses, and I feel good, and God didn't punish me. But when I had my accident and everything, I had to take a for-hire vehicle. And I didn't like it, but there was no choice. There are a lot of people who sometime during their life will have to, and it's not just NYU, there are a lot of other doctors, hospitals.
Listen, I had knee surgery at Beth Israel, part of NYU.
Yeah, exactly.
And I couldn't take the subway.
Yeah.
You know, I paid,
So,
for it. If we're going to deal with the lowest income people, and there is something called fair fares that's been proposed, there may be other ways, but that's not part of the plan I'm putting forward. Elected officials will hear what you have to say, and they're going to be doing add-ons. But to just say anybody that says that they have a disability, we're going to let on. When I was in charge of placards for disabilities, I could tell you we took away many placards from people that parked their cars and then went jogging. I have a cousin that I'm not going to turn in right now. He's a great handball player, but he has one of those city placards. I can't believe he got it. So I wouldn't recommend at this point, and that's got to be treated separately from what I presented today, and the right approach for that is with your elected officials.
that's who brought it up to me.
Okay. Chris?
Okay.
Since you mentioned about disability, and Edith could not be here, she asked me to answer this one certain question. As you know, I understand there are some people who get plaques, and there are some serious disabilities of certain people who are in wheelchairs or walkers or have service animals, as one of our members just said a few minutes ago. The concern is we also have to
No, keep going.
oh, I was like, what the heck was that?
No, to someone else.
We also have a senior also. The senior also in your area now, since 96th Street to 72nd Street, you have a lot of seniors, you have disabilities, but you also have a whole different level of ages there. The concern is that there are some of them who, and I will say, yes, maybe can afford it, but there are some who are after 96, like 100, where the night chairs are, around the 2nd Avenue, 1st Avenue, cannot afford it, and there is concern of them, because as you know, there is one accessible taxi now called Dispatcher Transportation. Their concern is if they have to go from where they live, NYCHA, to 72nd Street, because right now there is no 2nd Avenue up to 125th at this time until the next couple of more years, or when we all grow some old hair by then. How can we make sure that these prices stay in the same rate? Because there's one elected official will say a different thing, one other elected official will say something else, and the communities will all get confused and concerned.
Well, I think your first part was about people with disabilities and seniors. I'm a senior.
Yeah.
I take the subway. I suffer, on it. Lots of seniors are there with me. We all,
Yes.
Let's all take out our senior pass. I love the MTA for this inexpensive pass. It's really an incredible bargain. But as I said, when I said earlier, believe it or not, there are some people that are elderly and disabled that live in the borough of Staten Island.
Yes.
And there are people who are disabled and elderly and they live in New Jersey. It hasn't been the end of the world for them to get to a great hospital in Manhattan. And as Sheila pointed out, most medical facilities are outside this area. There are some. Now, I may sound a little callous here, but I'm not going to deal with the exemptions. Let the elected officials deal with it, because I can tell you, having been a city official, you open this crack, then it just keeps spilling over. It gets so wide.
And
Look
then
what
the
happened
money
when
goes down.
the governor offered a break in Staten Island. Now, Marty Golden wants it in Bay Ridge. Now the Rockaways have it. Now the people on both sides of the Tappan Zee have it. You open a door, you got to be really careful. You may defeat yourself.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last word, because someone interrupted us?
I'm
sorry.
You may regret it if you open this door and so many people start to find loopholes with it. The parking placards that the state gives out, I don't know how many of you believe that 100% of those are legitimate, or even 70% of them are legitimate, or 50% are legitimate on it. Because all of us have probably witnessed very healthy people that are leaving those vehicles. So a crack was open. The city of New York decided not to recognize those placards. It was during my administration, and we haven't to this day recognized those placards. And we weren't wrong, we were right. We watched the people in New York City that have those placards are in the many, many tens of thousands. The people that have the city permit are in the few thousands that really deserve it. When you open these things up to people that don't deserve it, you're hurting the people that truly deserve it and truly need it.
Let me just, I have a few questions which I hope you can answer. It may rest with the legislature how they end up doing this, but from the map of Fix NYC, West Street and the Henry Hudson Parkway are not being treated the way the FDR Drive is being treated. For instance, if a vehicle were to come through the Battery Tunnel, go up West Street, continue up the Henry Hudson Parkway, not enter the congestion zone per se, because they're still on West Street, they, from the looks of things, will be charged the congestion fee, while because the FDR is elevated, they will not. Is it because of all the access points to West Street versus the fact that FDR is sort of a limited access highway?
Well, the example that you give today, that person's paying at the Battery Tunnel. So the person's already paying. The person wouldn't pay twice. So in that example, no, there's no difference for that person.
What if you came over the Brooklyn Bridge, went on the ramp to the FDR southbound, went up West Street? They would be charged, correct?
Yes. So if you do that, and there are some people that do that. Most of those people aren't going up the Henry Hudson Parkway. There are a few, and there you're right. There are so many different things. There are so many entrances and exits that to outfit it, it's not a controlled highway. It's much more difficult.
And now, similarly, if you are in the Upper West Side, for instance, or close to the border of 60th Street, and you wanted to go to New Jersey, the Lincoln Tunnel was much closer. Is the tag reader sophisticated enough to track a vehicle on a designated route from the highway onto 42nd Street, onto 11th Avenue, and into the Lincoln Tunnel, and not give you the congestion charge, or will all those motorists be inspired to go to the GW Bridge to get to New Jersey?
Well, some of them might, but let's look at the reverse. All the people coming in from Rockland, all the people that are coming from northern Jersey, come over the George Washington Bridge. Where do they end up? On the streets and highways of the Upper West Side or the Upper East Side.
Depends on their destination.
No, when they're heading into the Central Business District. That's how they go. And the trucks, they're overloading our streets.
When you say West Side, you mean Midtown West Side then? Because if they're on the Henry Hudson, and they stay on it till 57.
No, I'm saying people from Rockland, people from northern Jersey, go to the Central Business District. Right now, many of them take the George Washington Bridge, and a lot of truckers take the George Washington Bridge. Truckers don't use the Henry Hudson Parkway, they don't use the FDR, they're using Broadway, they're using St. Nicholas Avenue, they're using the truck routes to go down there. This is an incentive for them to stay in New Jersey until they get to the Central Business District, the Lincoln Tunnel. This is good for New York. Are there some examples that you can give me where it's worse for somebody? Of course. How can anybody create the Garden of Eden here and everybody happy?
You can.
You know what, even if you created the Garden of Eden, there'll be protesters saying, you know, we don't treat serpents right, we say bad things about them.
Yes.
So, will you come up with examples where someone is worse off and somebody pays?
Sure.
Yeah, but if you're looking for the greater number, for the greater good, if you're looking for sanity in our transportation system, if you're looking to raise revenue for roads and bridges, if you're looking for fairness, this comes closer than what we have right now. What we have right now is not fair, is the point I want to make.
And the last thing I wanted to say is, you gave the Brooklyn Bridge example with the ramp to the FDR. This is another reason why your plan is better than the fixed NYC plan, because you know, the Manhattan Bridge puts you on Canal Street, the Williamsburg Bridge puts you on Delancey Street. Even if you were going to take the FDR and not enter the heart of the central business district, you're going to hit the charge.
Right.
So, you know, the lines for the Brooklyn Bridge would be.
Yeah, you know, the Move New York plan, we never changed all the bridges, yes.
You touched on the buses that are using the streets as their depots. How does this plan address that, or does it at all?
It's an item that the fixed NYC, what I showed you doesn't, except for the fixed NYC, said that that has to be addressed. A study would be done by the state, and I think that was part of the full budget items.
It was one of the.
You know,
budget
so
amendments.
nobody has an answer to that right now. Back in the 1980s, before deregulation, and I was traffic commissioner, every bus that came from outside the city had to go to an off-street terminal. We solved it. It was a problem in the 1930s. We passed a law, solved it for 50 years. Reagan came in with deregulation, and we said you can't regulate out-of-state buses. So that's why they're on city streets when they should not be on city streets. I don't have a good answer for that solution, because the federal government the city has lost numerous times when they tried to fight on this. But maybe there's some better way to do it. I don't have the answer to that. Yes.
I have a question. My contractor said he goes up and down town to various jobs. Is there a maximum number of times he would be charged crossing 60th Street?
Once.
Just once a
Yeah,
day?
I failed to say that, yeah.
Once a day.
We do not want, you know, somebody who's doing exactly what you're saying. It's a repair person that's going back and
Yeah.
forth. No, we're not gonna, we
So
recommend
we
a
only
once a day
once.
charge. So
Right, once a
you
day.
do, some drivers become winners here, because, you know, taxis and Ubers that go to the airport and come through the Midtown Tunnel, because they'll do that now, they won't have to pay going through the Midtown Tunnel. They will just pay once they enter Manhattan. There are a lot of winners that are even in cars. And for the example of the person who is going to a doctor's appointment and has to take an Uber, they're going to get there faster, and they're going to pay less money, because the fee on the taxi will be lower, the fee on the Uber will be lower. 50 years ago, I drove a New York City taxi cab. I did not want to spend the afternoon with my passenger. I was losing money, and that person was losing time. That's what's happening today.
But what is to stop the Uber or the cab for passing every customer?
They will.